try to sign into the YouTube because it says you can.
Yeah, you can continue to chat. But we're live now. Sorry, I should have told you we're going live.
Here's us.
Here's us. Good evening, everybody. Welcome along to another Blether with. No, Kat has not had a major hair shaving operation. She is she's off doing duties with her other job tonight, and we've got Davis. You might remember Davis was our guest presenter with Polly Logan back a wee while ago before the summer break. So, well, not yet an old hand at the Blethers. He's got enough experience to keep us entertained with some randomness. I'm not sure if we'll hit Kat's level of randomness, but we'll see how we get on and where the drams take us. Good evening, Frank. Good evening, Dave. Good evening to, I'm going to really pronounce this wrong, Wraith. Good evening to all you guys watching on YouTube and to the guys on Facebook as well. Feel free, fire in the comments, fire in the questions. If you've got any questions for Craig from the Glenwyvis Distillery, please do ask away. Davis, what's in your glass tonight? That's always the first question we want to know.
I've not actually poured anything yet. I'm so badly prepared.
I mean, we did only ask you yesterday, so you've only had like 24 hours to think of a whiskey. It's
I know, I have.
Well, sometimes the whiskey picks itself. So I have gone for the 2018 release from tonight's guest distillery. I think it's about 50%, or it tells me in the back, thankfully, it's 60% first fill Tennessee whiskey casks, 25% Oloroso, then 15% refill. So a nice wee combination of three different cask styles. Lovely little gold straw colour on it.
Some Glenwyvis there.
Sorry?
You've got a number of Glenwyvis boxes there.
Yeah, so we've got the current 2019 bottle in there as well. This just arrived in the shop today, hence it hasn't been opened yet. I have tried this. I think I tried it at the Elgin show last year. And then a couple of the gins. So again, another new one. We've got the Quercus Robur gin. So gin aged in whiskey and American oak casks. First fill and sherry casks.
Well, I have been assisted by a very, very glamorous in-house assistant.
Nice. There we go.
The first one, just to warm up.
Oh, nice with King's Ginger.
King's Ginger, yeah.
Dutch liqueur. Absolutely. Really nice. It's an absolute banging hot toddy, the King's Ginger. Or rusty nail, if you want to go somewhere a little bit different.
Fantastic. I'll need to try that. It was originally marketed as being the King's driving companion. I'm not sure that we go down so well nowadays.
Maybe not. I don't think we want to advertise that just too much. I suppose the King wouldn't drive, would he? He'd have somebody driving for you.
Yeah, he'd have somebody driving him. I think it was put on the box as if it was he was driving and he's got a little hunting flask with him full of this stuff just for a chest. No.
What's everyone at home drinking? We've got Dave Ferguson, who's not feeling too well, man flu. I'll be honest, Dave, I think I'm going to wake up with a man flu. I'm already starting to feel a bit shivery. So I might be joining you tomorrow. But he's on the Glencadam 17-year-old.
For medicinal purposes with Texas barbecue sauce Pringles.
Whiskey and Pringles. I mean, as long as, once you pop, you can't stop. Drink responsibly, but eat all the Pringles you can.
I'm interested to know what came first. Was it the Glencadam 17 or was it the Texas barbecue Pringles?
If you've had Pringles lying around for 17 years, I'm pretty sure they'll be off by now. Without further ado, guys, put in the comments what you're drinking tonight. We had somebody who was saying that they're not poured. Frank from Petehead, he's not got anything poured yet. So hopefully we'll find out what he's drinking. Let's bring on our guest. Let's bring Craig on. This is always the moment of truth. There he goes. Hello, Craig. How are you?
Hey guys, how are we getting on?
Good, thanks. Yeah, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm really good, actually. Thanks for having me along tonight. It's I've watched a few of these before, and it's quite nice to be on. So
Thanks very much for agreeing to join us. It's great that you guys are always so willing to give up a Thursday night. I think when we say you're going to have a dram and we class it as work, then everyone's going to have up for it. It's a good excuse, isn't it?
It's a hard job. Someone has to do it, right?
So, Craig, you've got quite strong Inverurie links with your family, don't you? I know you're.
Yeah, I've got my uncle and auntie living in Inverurie, and I've spent many a night in Inverurie, frequenting many of the local watering holes with my uncle, and been to quite a few of the Lokies games. So, it's a place that I'm very familiar with, even with my quite strong Highland accent. It's a place I'm quite fond of.
Awesome. Well, let me say thank you for joining us all the way from kind of just north of Dingwall, isn't it?
Just north of Dingwall, I am. Yeah.
Are you actually in the shadow of Glenwyvis, the mountain?
Yeah, so we can see Glenwyvis quite clearly from where we are. The distillery itself actually it's got beautiful panoramic views. It's really quite stunning. The only problem is we're just creeping into when the bad weather comes. We're just at the sort of snow line, so it can get a little bit. We have to plan deliveries around that. But yeah, the views from the distillery are stunning. We've got real panoramic views all the way. We can see all the way to Loch Looker, and you see Strathpeffer in the distance. It's a lovely spot for a distillery.
Yeah, I guess it's great for production, but not so great for the kind of logistics.
Logistics are something that over the past 6 years we sort of have managed to fine tune, but it means that when we get a malt delivery, we have to make sure that we time it with the very predictable Scottish weather.
Yeah.
So, but it's an absolutely beautiful spot. I go in there most days and look out the window in my office, and it's breathtaking.
Nice.
There's not many people can say that, eh? Like
no.
My office, and the view is amazing.
Yeah, no, it's something we don't take for granted.
Excellent.
So how did it all start for you, Craig? Because you're quite a young lad. I think you're younger than me. I'm not sure if you're younger than me.
Well, I mean, despite what the top of the head says, I'm 32. I've had a hard paper round in my youth, but no, I've been involved with whiskey for pretty much my whole adult life. I took great influence from my grandfather. His name was Jock MacRitchie. It's Cammie's dad. He worked in many distilleries throughout his life. Glenfiddich, Glenmorangie, Glengoyne, Glenord, Milburn. He'd done work in all these distilleries. He was a heating engineer, but he spent a lot of times at these places on call. And so he was sort of a real influence on me growing up, and he liked a dram as any good Highland man should, and he gave me some of my first drams of whiskey, or my grandfather that gave them to me. I'll say for the reasons of the tape, I was of course 18 years old when he gave me a sample of single malt.
100%.
But that sort of really kickstarted my interest in Scotch whiskey. And when I was 18, I left and I went to University in Aberdeen, and I studied biology in University in Aberdeen. And whilst there, I joined the Malt Whisky Society. And I was on the committee on there for 2 years out of the 4 years I spent in Aberdeen. And that just made my love of it completely blossom. And when I was 18 as well, just when I was home for the summer and for the Christmas time, I worked in the whiskey shop on Bridge Street in Inverness. So you can see it was was gradually moving in this one direction of whiskey. And it was whilst working in the whiskey shop in Inverness that it was like my moment of epiphany that this is really what I want to do. The manager of that shop was a guy called Scott Dunn, and if there's anyone who's ever been up in Inverness in the past wee while, sadly Scott passed away. He wasn't old at all, but he passed away unfortunately just a few years ago. And but he was such an influence, and the man's knowledge on whiskey was just second to none. And he sort of really took me and maybe some of my friends under his wing, and just to show you what a good influence Scott was. So I'm currently the manager of Glenwyvis distillery. One of the other guys who worked in the shop with us is manager of Aberfeldy distillery right now, and another guy who worked in the shop is quite high up in Diageo down in Edinburgh. So it's obviously Scott had a big influence in all of our whiskey educations, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
It was homework every night where you got given drams and you got to take them home and study them. So it was when I left university in 2014, I worked for a year full time in the whiskey shop in Inverness, and I was really wanting to get into the proper industry, into a distillery. And that's when rumours were sort of going about, there's going to be a new distillery starting up in Dingwall, apparently. And when I saw the job offer came up, obviously there was no distillery at the time, it was just an idea. But when the job offer came up, I put in my CV and I got the job. And that was in 2015. And I was employee number 1 at Glenwyvis.
I was going to say, was that right, that you were the first employee?
Yeah. I was employee number 1. And from then on, it's been the last 9 years of my life have been spent at Glenwyvis, and I've worn many, many hats whilst working at Glenwyvis. It's been a real.
What role were you in then? What did you?
When I first started, it was marketing and sales. So we had a gin which was just called Glenwyvis gin. It was our own recipe, but it was actually distilled in the distillery up in Shetland Real Distillery up in Saxonburg Distillery. Because Stuart Nickerson, who was involved with that distillery, was a director also at Glenwyvis at the time. So I had the job of selling just 3,000 bottles of this contract distilled gin. And the idea behind we were very open, even back at that time, we were very open that the gin came from Shetland, because we were all about the idea of the community-owned distillery was already established that we wanted to build. And we thought we would support another small Scottish community at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first year, the job was raising awareness of this project that's coming and selling this gin. And then in 2016, it's when we went out live with the first crowdfunder. And what we raised over £1 million in 6 weeks. It was an incredible response. And at that time, we were the largest community-owned company in the UK.
Right.
So, and just from then on in 2016, when we raised the money, we started construction in 2017, and just for a whiskey lover to be involved, all the way from it being a field with cows to, a distillery producing whiskey was really phenomenal for me. I remember the day that the foundations were laid very well, and just thinking, wow, this is really taking shape. And equally, what was really cool was getting to go to Forsyths in Rothes, to see the stills getting made. That was really quite something special for me.
It's quite a privilege to get in the doors at Forsyths.
Oh no, as a self-proclaimed whiskey geek, that was really, really something. So the distillery finished construction, and we had sort of an open day on the 30th of November 2017, where we got lots of people from the local area in, took them through the distillery. A big win for us at that time was our first distillery manager was a guy called Duncan Tate. Now, if there's anyone who has sort of worked within the production side of the whiskey industry, Duncan is someone who, even now to this day, I have huge, huge respect for. He came from being the manager of Mortlach Distillery to Glenwyvis, and he had worked many years in Diageo. He'd been manager of Knockando, he'd been manager of Glenkinchie. He was briefly manager at Lochnagar, and he was manager at Oban. So he knew what he was doing, and his knowledge was just second to none. So, I always say, my two big influences in my whiskey career were Scott in the whiskey shop for the actual liquid side of it, the story behind all these different whiskies and just the overall knowledge of the overall industry, and then Duncan for the more technical production knowledge. He was just incredible. But Duncan, when he arrived, someone of his caliber, we just said, make the whiskey that you want to make. And for someone who had been told his whole life by Diageo, essentially, what whiskey, this is the profile we want, this is the quantity we want. But then we said to him, make the whiskey you want. So he went with a traditional Eastern Highland malt whiskey. And and just that was the first casks were filled. I think it was the 2nd or 3rd of February 2018. And I remember when that happened very clearly, because it was the first 3 casks, and we had this warehouse that was just seemed massive at the time with these 3 casks in it. And I was thinking, how long is... And now if you saw the warehouse today, it is just jam-packed, and we're trying to find space wherever we can, like most facilities in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been a remarkable journey, and from progressing from sales and marketing, then I was head of sales, and then I finally got the move into production in 2019. I became a distillery operator under Duncan. Then when Duncan left the company in 2020, I took over as the sole distillery operator, and then I worked under the then, who I think you had on the Blether before, Matthew Farmer. I think he was the manager.
Mm-hmm.
He was the manager previously. Who came from Seattle. Had a really good bourbon background, and Matthew had a very different way of looking at things, and it brought, like, again, this sort of different innovation into it, like to go with Duncan's real traditional methods, and it was really good for the company at the time. And then just within the last 4 months, moving into the distillery manager's role, to me feels like the completion of a almost decade-long journey. Like I eat, sleep Glenwyvis. It's everything about me. I could talk about it for hours.
Awesome.
You reckon then, could you have envisaged yourself becoming what you are now back when you were working at Bridge Street?
Not at all. It really is. I was saying this to my wife the other day. I was at a health and safety course, exciting stuff, last Thursday, run by the SWA, the Scottish Whisky Association. And I just thought it'd be like any other health and safety course I'd ever been on.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wore comfy clothes, just jeans and a t-shirt, and I walked into that room. I was the only person not in a suit. And when I walked into that room and seen the giants of the whiskey industry that were in that room, there was 94% of all Scotch whisky distilleries were represented in that room for this health and safety course. Like distillery managers from all over Scotland, global health and safety manager from like Diageo. I was like, oh, I'm really underdressed for this. I had to catch myself in that moment, thinking, wow, if I was 18 and could see myself in this room with these people, it's like mind blown.
It kind of feels like when you turn up on what you thought was the day for PE at school, but it turns out that's actually tomorrow. You're the only one.
It was totally like that. And it was just getting, because I know myself, even before I worked in a distillery, I went to a lot of whiskey festivals, in Aberdeen, Inverness, and maybe Edinburgh. And I was that really annoying guy who really wanted to talk to like the staff from the distilleries and like think, oh wow, this is so cool. And there were so many whiskey. We had whiskey tastings as well when we were in the society in Aberdeen. And what fun we used to have at those. And we would get distillery managers come and do tastings with us. And we had one sort of global brand ambassador for quite a well-known brand, which I'm not going to mention in this, who ended up coming back to my flat and finishing more bottles of whiskey with us, So like to me, that person on the other side now, looking back, I'm like, wow, it's been some journey for me.
What's the one question that you used to ask all these guys that now you just can't stand being asked?
Oh, it was always about the barley. You thought you were really clever if you asked about the barley. Like, what strain of barley are you using? What's the ratios of your grits, husks, and flour? And now if I get asked that now, I'm just like, oh no, I was that guy. And I'm like, obviously, one of the worst ones I've ever had asked of me since working in the distillery was, what is the nitrogen content of the barley you're using? And I'm like, why do you even care about that? And like, let me look up the current ticket because it changes batch to batch. But it's just something I think trying to be clever. But I know now, like, if I ever go on a distillery tour now, I just keep my mouth shut and just enjoy being in another distillery. You don't want to be that guy.
Do you go in with like a mask on, like a James Bond high five, kind of just no one knows, just no one's cottoned on yet, I'm going to stay quiet?
No, you normally just stay quiet. If it's a smaller tour, you'll say to like the tour guide, like I work at a distillery or like I'm the manager of a distillery. But what's quite good is traditionally for our Christmas night out, Glenwyvis has gone to another local distillery for a tour. And we normally call ahead. So last time we actually went to Glenord, just at Muirvord. And, we had our own private tour, but no one told the tour guide she was doing a tour for a distillery, for distillery operators and all that. And when she started the tour, she started telling us, whiskey's made from water, yeast, malt, barley, and we had, we told her we work in a distillery, we don't, and we said just show us what's different, what makes you unique, and then that just makes a much better tour,
Yeah.
But we've been in quite a few, but so then we're trying to think about which distillery we could go to this year, for a wee tour. I've got a few in mind, but yeah, it's always good to reach out ahead of time. We've been to Tomat and had really good tours there. We went up to Dornoch. It doesn't take long to look around Dornoch distillery, but we're good friends with Phil and Simon. The Thompson brothers. So they're always happy to see us.
We've just taken in a couple of their blends into the shop, and I was up in Dornoch about a month ago now, and Phil and Simon were in the shop. Obviously, just like yourself, always busy, always doing something. So it was great of them just to give us kind of 10 minutes of their time, just off the back of that, because I've been trying to get Thompson Brothers stuff in the shop for a wee while because I know how good it is, but it's always selling out. It's such demand, you've got balance and stuff. But luckily, we said, well, let's start on rung one. If you can give us a couple of cases of the kind of core blended whiskies, then we can start there. So thankfully, we've got that in there. It's you don't want to be that guy at the distillery. I think sometimes it's quite nice if you want to get that genuine experience, just to sit back and listen. I was over in Islay in August, and I didn't tell anyone that I had a whiskey shop or kind of probably no more than the average punter doing the tours. But it's so nice just to see them kind of chill out, relax, and pour. I think sometimes when you mention it, especially you being a distillery manager at that level, they're going to start second guessing everything, and they're like, "Am I telling this right? He's going to pick up if I'm wrong, or she's going to know that I'm wrong in this." And you don't want to put that kind of pressure on the tour guys. You just want to give the experience.
Yeah, and you always find it's the people who ask the awkward questions that probably don't know as much as they think they do.
Mm-hmm.
I always had, again, from my whiskey shop days, people, and even now, people say, I'm not like you, I'm not a connoisseur. I said, I would never, ever describe myself as a connoisseur.
Yeah.
There's always something new to learn.
Yeah.
I think I see that on the floor as well. People are like, well, you're the expert, you tell me. And it's like, I'm like David Stark that way, because I think in his Independent Bottler's book, one of the first things he wrote in it was, I am never, ever going to call myself an expert, because that means that I know absolutely everything to do with whiskey. And, it's that age-old saying that every day is a school day. But it's the same. Like, Craig, you'll know when you're working in the shop, as I do with the Inverurie shop on a weekend or so, some of the distillers have got days off and they come in. We've had a few sort of visit from more local distilleries, and they come in and they'll say, oh yeah, I actually work as, this, that, or the next title for the shop for a distillery. And you kind of sit back and go, well, like you're saying, Mike, folk will start to fluster and you're like, oh, I better be on my good guard here. Like, I better know my stuff when people come asking. But it's nice though to just like take the hat off and just blend in for a while.
No, it's definitely good too. I did a whiskey tasting about 4 or 5 months ago in Against the Grain in Elgin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never done a whiskey tasting in Elgin before, and you're sort of like, going towards the Heart of Space side there. And I think there's only about 13, 14 people in the tasting, but like, I think about half of them worked in the whiskey industry in one way or the other, so you're like, okay. So at that point, you're just trying, again, I like think in that position, you're just saying, what makes Glenwyvis unique? That's the story I try to tell. I'm not going to try and tell you about how to make whiskey, and there's things we do differently at Glenwyvis, which I think I like to talk about. Aside from obviously we are the only, or currently, that only 100% community-owned distillery in Scotland, which I hope there can be a lot more. Because I feel that's a really good direction for the industry to take. Taking it back into the hands of the people, so to say. Mm-hmm. But everything we do at Glenwyvis is for flavour, and style, not volume. So like we have quite long fermentations. We've got an average 144-hour fermentation we do, so that's six days.
That's quite low. That's become quite not common, but fermentation seems to be the new maturation, hasn't it? People are really honing in on fermentation, get a lot of flavour pre-cask.
It's just the amount of flavour that you can put into when you're not just looking at the amount of alcohol to turn around, but the shortest fermentation as possible. We set quite cold our washbacks, and we set them about between 13 and 15 degrees normally, and just let them tick away for 6 days. And but obviously at that point you're not getting more alcohol produced, but you're getting all your flavour compounds coming through, and we find it gives quite a nice fruity character to our new make. So I mean, it's just all the wee things that you can do. Everything we do at Glenwyvis is distinctively unhurried. Try not to make other emails unhurried, but
in the tagline for Glenwyvis somewhere, it's just distinctively unhurried.
I know. I should get that on my shirt somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be great. You should have that as your out of office reply as well. Is that?
I like that.
It's our ethos that we won't hurry to get back to you.
That's it. Craig, where are you? What's in your glass?
Oh yes. Well, it's Glenwyvis, but it's actually not. It's an independent bottling. One that's again probably harks back to it's a Little Brown Dog.
Lovely.
Obviously, they're not far at all from. It's. I'm not ashamed to admit I'm a groupie of Little Brown Dog as an independent bottler. I buy
that probably makes three.
I buy a disgusting amount of a Little Brown Dog bottlings to the point where like obviously we've got a very good relationship with Andrew and Chris at Glenwyvis, and but when they came up when they got in touch and they wanted when they got in touch and they wanted
everyone far away.
Glenwyvis, like that was like because I was such a huge fan of them. I was like, for me, that was a bit of like a wow, moment when they came in. I hope I never came on too strong. Mm-hmm. But they bottled. It was a Madeira cask from 2019, and this was the first Madeira cask that Glenwyvis has been released. Mm-hmm. And it's a cracking dram. That's actually my second bottle of that I'm on, and I have more. I bought quite a few because I love it. But they're good guys, and every time they release, I always buy a couple of bottles.
We'll probably hear from Andrew soon. He's got a uncanny ability to know when somebody online is talking about him, and he'll just jump on and say hello.
Just his ears start to go, don't they? Well, I've managed to upgrade from the King's Ginger, and I'm now on.
Oh wow!
Nice.
Glenwyvis.
Where did you get that from?
Well,
that's the sample pack. Yeah.
If I told you, Craig.
Yeah, so that's a nice thing.
Somebody will get sacked.
That's a nice thing.
I'm in touch with Dr. Jock quite.
Of course, I was with him today.
Who, honestly, to be honest, it wasn't through Dr. Jock that I'd heard of Glenwyvis, because we'd had that Little Brown Dog in at the shop, which sold phenomenally, by the way. And then the story behind it, you can give that over to the customers as well, and it's a community-owned distillery. And as soon as they hear that, it's like right, okay. And then they hear that Little Brown Dog's also an independent bottler. They're like, oh, this is even better, So it's like it's two great reasons to get them across in sales. But Dr. Jock had come across on LinkedIn, and they're trying to get you sorted out with something. And then there was this lovely little packet had arrived through the letterbox. With that, the 2018 and the 2019 as well. Yeah. That's one of 2019. So
he's brilliant. He's such a good advocate. So Dr. Jock Ramsey is one of our volunteer directors. We have a board of 12 volunteer directors, and the amount of work that they do for no money, just for the project, it really is fantastic. So Jock's the Goodwill Fund. So the Goodwill Fund is a method by which Glenwyvis gives back to its community. That's the whole point of community ownership. So in the past just under 2 years, we've given £30,000 back to local charities and causes in our local area. And so even at a small distillery, it's good. Also, in the future, when you have 10-year-old whiskey in international markets, there'll be more money available.
That's
so
it. So is that where the name of the gins come from then, the Goodwill?
Well, good, yeah, exactly. That's why the name Goodwill is, because it is the community ethos behind it.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
So is the gin now distilled on site now?
Yes, we have a 400-litre gin still, also made by Forsyths. It's a 400-litre copper gin still from Forsyths Office. I don't know how many of them there are kicking about. It's a beautiful still. But we make our still we can make any spirit. No, you can make vodka in there, you can make rum, but we only really make gin. And we've done, on top of our normal Goodwill gin, we've done 3 cask mature gins. So the Quercus Roebuck, the one you have there, is one we did in sherry cask maturation. We did one called Quercus Alba, which was in bourbon cask. And we've done one the most popular one we've ever done was our Christmas gin, which was aged in a mixture of sherry and bourbon cask and also infused with spices. And that was so popular. And we haven't made it now since, I think it was 2019, but I'm going to be releasing it for the first time since 2019 in a few weeks' time. So, and that's actually been gin that's been maturing for 4 years in sherry and bourbon cask with spice. So, it's almost counterintuitive to put gin away for that long, but it's, again, we're decidedly unhurried. Why not?
I can see you running with that for quite some time now. To decide.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So your spices then, what makes it Christmassy? Is that a mix of like cinnamon, star anise, and
cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg are the main ones.
Yeah.
But the original Christmas gin, why not? I can tell the story. I'll talk to myself in the morning. But so the original Christmas gin we made was because there was a mistake in the gin printout recipe. So we ended up, there was a decimal point was in the wrong place, and we put 10 times too much cinnamon into the gin. And I remember the smell in the distillery that day. It was just myself and Duncan, and it smelled amazing. The distillery just smelled like Christmas. And we're like, but it didn't smell like the gin was meant to smell. And it turns out when the recipe was handed over from Shetland to ourselves, I think it was just a decimal point was in the wrong place.
There's a quicker way to use an air freshener like that, and you just put cloves in an orange and put it on top of your radiator.
Yeah. Oh,
it's the job.
it was an incredible smell. So we decided to do something a wee bit different with that gin. So that's when we put it into cask, and that became the first Christmas gin. And that sometimes they say, the best inventions come from mistakes or accidents.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're quite happy with that one.
Sounds pretty good, to be fair. So do you distill with the spices then, or do you said you infuse afterwards in the cask?
So it's both for the Christmas gin. It's both.
Yeah.
So there is more in the distillation.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the pot, but also there is an infusion afterwards as well.
Excellent.
So just get that extra flavour into it. And was it the recommended pour we said for the Christmas gin, which we found was really, really good, and it was Duncan came up with it, was our Christmas gin with hot cloudy apple juice. It went so well together. It was a real winter warmer. We have a big shinty game. Like obviously where I live, shinty's a religion and not a sport.
Yeah.
And on the 2nd of January every year, my local team Love It plays against Bewley. The other make that rivalry makes the Old Firm look pretty tame, and that's now my drink of choice when it's like -4 outside. I have a thermos that I fill with hot cloudy apple and our Christmas gin, and take that with me to keep me warm at the side of the pitch.
Magic.
That sounds good. You've got some fans on Facebook. JDT is saying, "Great job, Craig. Great gin, fantastic whiskey."
Oh, thank you very much.
Man there. On YouTube, we've got CA Scotty. He still feels new to whiskey. He's trying as many different distilleries from independent bottlings as he can afford, but he's not yet had a Glenwyvis. He's excited to hear more about it. So hopefully you're enjoying the chat tonight, Scotty, and learn a wee bit more about Glenwyvis. Craig, let's just on that, I'm going to be counterintuitive there and say you worked at the whiskey shop on Bridge Street.
Yeah.
You weren't focused on one single distillery. What were the
Mhm.
kind of standout drams? What would you reach for?
Oh, as my whiskey education progressed, it did change slightly. When I first joined, two distilleries that I really, really liked. So when I remember when I went in for my interview, because one of my buddies got me that job in there, and one of my best pals, and he was my best man at my wedding, and now I say he's quite high up in Diageo. He said there's a job going in the whiskey shop. We're both 18. Come along. So I went along, and I grew up working on. My family had a farm in the Black Isle, so I grew up growing barley essentially.
Right.
And I turned up in pretty much jeans and a t-shirt for a job interview, not knowing that was probably not the best idea. And I think Scott at the time said he gave me a job just for that summer, just as a favour to my buddy Chris, who already worked there, but I ended up working there for 5 years. But when I first joined, I tried to brag that, oh yeah, no, I know whiskey already. I know whiskey, like I've tried Johnny Walker Blue Label to trying to impress him, and he was like, yeah, no, so you like the blended stuff, It's like, so when I first started my real education, it was Glenfarclas 10-year-old was one of the very first that got me into drinking whiskey, and actually the Talisker 10. That were the two that I really liked. And when I moved to Aberdeen, I always made sure I had a bottle of each, even in my my university halls, which sometimes was a bad idea. And
you must have been quite well off for a student having a bottle of them.
Well, birthdays and Christmases are fantastic things.
The student birthday goes on nowadays, is it? Aye.
That's you just forgo eating for a couple of days and you can afford a bottle of whiskey.
There you go.
Up and see. But as it progressed, one that I really fell in love with, even to this day, was Glendronach. I obviously just by Ford Huntley, not too far from you guys. And the other one was very close to you guys, was Glengeary. I found the way I always described Glengeary when I was selling it was unashamedly Highland in character, and I loved that about it.
Yeah.
I remember when it was my cousin's wedding, Cammie's daughter's wedding, she got married in Meldrum House.
Laura.
Laura, yeah. And all of the decanters, all the rooms had decanters of Glengeary in them. And my parents and all that don't drink whiskey, so I remember going from room to room popping up this whiskey.
Brilliant.
But
Glengeary bottled a cask for Meldrum House.
Oh, fantastic! It's again Scott in the whiskey shop. It was one of his favourites as well. He absolutely loved Glengeary.
If only Kat was here to hear this.
Right,
buzzing, wouldn't she? She'd be buzzing.
Kat's also she's the visitor centre assistant manager at Glengeary.
Oh right, okay. Well, fantastic. Well, you pass on saying it's still one of my favourite drams to this day.
We'll have to tell her that wasn't planted, but we do have to. We did tell you. I don't think I need to mention it because Kat wasn't on tonight. But we have a game where whenever we mention Glengeary, we have to take a dram. So
yeah, Kat usually manages to shoehorn it in somewhere, so we've managed to do it even when she's not here. Unreal. There's I did a quick look here on Instagram, and there's a page called Whiskies Under 100. This is specifically for CA Scotty, who said that he was still new to whiskey and he was trying to find as many as he could find. Glenwyvis are actually there on. Oh, it's quite bright. I don't know if you can see it.
To the left. Yeah.
But there is Glenwyvis in a lineup with some independent bottlers along the side. Is there? That's on Whiskies Under 100. Cool. It's a great little page to look out for if you are trying to keep it under 100. That's what you can afford. So hopefully he sees it. See what he thinks. And we were talking about Glenfarclas 10 there. I got a rather rare bottle this week of Glenfarclas 10. And I have to share it with you. It's a bit of a flex. I'm not going to lie.
I know exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, you know exactly what's happening here. This is the Glenfarclas 10, but it is presented to the winner of the 2024 World Porridge.
Oh, wow. The Golden Spurtle.
The Golden Spurtle, yeah. And this is apparently a one of two So one of the bottles, they only make 2 a year, and one of the bottles gets auctioned off for local causes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other bottle goes to the winner. And the winner happens to be my brother-in-law, who doesn't drink whiskey, sadly. Sadly for him, but
that's a cool bottle to have.
It's just it's not one I thought I'd ever see in the collection, but there you go. Have you got a favourite expression from Glengarry and Glendronach?
Oh wow! So Glengarry, believe it or not, well, they did some of their Renaissance bottlings were just out of this world, I thought. And a few years ago, when I went through Aberdeen Airport, I got they had like a cask strength sherry cask Glengarry, which I nursed for about 3 years before it, and I've got none left now. But I always
15-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah, I still think that is, and I put it out there when I was drinking it. My favourite sherry cask whiskey, potentially of all time. I thought
it was phenomenal. It was really, really phenomenal. And I say I've got none left now. But I always found when I was drinking it, just for a good affordable dram, the Founder's Reserve from Glengarry, I thought, for an entry level dram had no right to be as good as it was. You have to put it that way. But Glendronach, so I visited, whilst living in Aberdeen, I visited both these distilleries, probably far too much. And Glendronach, for me, it was always the Allardyce, the 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Even above the Parliament, the 21.
Yeah.
Was my. When I got a wee bit older and could start affording maybe better whiskies for drinking, I used to buy quite a few of the single cask range when Billy Walker still had the distillery.
Yeah.
And even now, I've still got a few single cask Glendronachs that I'm slowly getting my way through.
Mm-hmm.
But those would be the main ones for me out of those two distilleries.
Yeah. I've got a Renaissance 17 here. I opened it during a Blether. I think we had the Ardray guys on, and I was halfway through the dram, and I noticed that we had Ron Welsh's signature on the bottle. He was at the distillery, and I was buying a bottle. He just said, "Do you want me to sign it?" I said, "Hell yeah!" Completely forgot he got him to sign it, so I just cracked open it, and I said, "Oh shit!" It's the whiskey inside's the same, so signature doesn't make the whiskey any better.
No.
Sell the empty bottle on like Depop or Vintage or something like that for like
Vintage.
Signature on it, you're sorted.
Tim Powell's has just joined us on YouTube. He's apologising for being late. Apology not accepted, Tim. Get a dram down yet by way of punishment.
That'll fix it. Yeah. Have you been asked to sign any bottles, Craig?
I have, and for me that was a weird experience because my signature looks like it's a 5-year-old, and I thought I'm ruining these bottles. And I always, because when I first started working in the whiskey shop when I was 18, I like collection. I collect whiskey, I do, and I've got between 200 and 300 bottles at home here right now. Most of them bought actually in the 5 years I worked in the whiskey shop, because I was living in university, between university and my parents' house at the time, so I didn't really have a mortgage to pay. So I could afford to put my wages back into the shop, and I always found that when you were the guy putting the limited bottles on the shelf, you could easily put one aside for yourself. And so my collection grew quite a lot when I worked there. But so I don't really like signatures on bottles, because obviously you normally see that signed bottles don't go for as much if you ever did want to sell them on. But for me, when I got someone goes, "Oh, can you sign a bottle?" I was like, "Really? Me? Like on a bottle?" And especially when looking now, like that 2019 bottle, I could say that so the 2018 Glenwyvis was always 100% Duncan. The 2019 bottle, I would say, was probably about 60-70% Duncan, about 30% me, and then everything after that, it's been 100% myself that's made, so it's a strange one, it really is, from someone who's come as a real whiskey lover all the way through, because it was always such a hard industry to break into as well. I remember when I was younger, like they always just, you have to wait for someone to die before you can get a job in a distillery. You know,
Yeah.
Everyone just moves up a level when the top
it
level.
is. It's a bit like that, but it is. So I have signed a few boxes, few bottles. I have all. It's sort of made me a little bit chuffed inside, but my signature is just terrible. If you see it, it looks like a 5-year-old.
That's it. You're somebody's rock star in that moment. Must be quite a feeling.
I actually remember talking about signatures on bottles. It was the very first Dornoch Whisky Festival, and I was working the stall for Glenwyvis at the time, and they had an exclusive Wolfburn that was just for the festival.
Okay.
And Michael, who was the manager of the shop up there at the time, I said, "Put one aside for me. I'll definitely take it." And I went at the end of the festival to go and buy it, and there was a signature on the bottle. I said, "Where did that come from?" I read the signature, it was Charlie McLean. I said, "Why did you sign this bottle of Wolfburn?" And he was like, "I don't know, he was just here signing bottles." So my bottle ended up with Charlie. It was such a random signature to have in that bottle of Wolfburn.
Charlie is the kind of guy who gets away with that, he just walks into the shop with a Sharpie, just signs bottles and goes, "Yeah, that'll work."
that was quite special. So I kept that bottle just for that. That was quite a funny one.
That's brilliant. Just going to say good evening to Graham Fraser. He's just joined us. I hope you're well. Managed to make it on live, which is great. He's not out touring distilleries or taking photos of them just now. So it's good to have you along, Graham. I hope you're enjoying it. So signatures on bottles. Have you had to sign any body parts yet?
No, not yet. Thankfully.
Not on that level of rockstar quite yet.
Not quite yet.
Having said that, I'm going to be up at you next week, so get your pen ready.
That's it.
That's why he shaved his head.
Sign it there.
I'll get a permanent marker in.
Yeah.
No,
or a tattoo, just make it permanent.
Tattoo gun, yeah, I like that. Although we've had a few people before, like come up to the distillery and back, like sign casks and all that, because we sell quite a few private casks. We're still one of the few ones that do, and we sell like the wee octaves, so. And some people have asked, can you sign my cask as well and stuff like that, Not that makes much of a difference to the taste of the whiskey, I would think, but no, it's just a nice wee touch.
It's a really nice sentimental touch, though, isn't it? I think I remember we were at Knockdhu with the Whisky Academy last September. Oh my God, that was over a year ago now, and they've just got chalk hanging about, and you can sign it yourself in chalk, but you know that just. And then there's the next tour group that comes in. But if you're away,
I think they had a school class visit the distillery, and that's why the chalk was there for them to write. But we were there in March, and your bottle, your cask, your signature was still on a cask.
Yes, that explains why I find the chalk so fascinating. Then, because
that's another brilliant distillery, though. Not good. Is it Gordon? Is he still there?
Yeah, Gordon's still there. Gordon
when I was again in university in Aberdeen, that was another distillery we went to a lot, and we were always taking such good care of. Again, so a Knox, another. I've not had it. I've had quite a few Knox. I remember working in the whiskey shop. They did the Peter Arkle collection, and a few of them were lovely. And was it the 18-year-old Knox was just stunning, but I've not had one in a wee while now.
No, they're stopping the 18, or have stopped the 18. It's going to be the 18 and 24, I think, are coming out, and they're getting replaced by 21. But I think initially the 21-year-old is going to be 24-year-old stock, and they're going to phase that down through time to 21. So, and the 18, I think, was absolutely banging. Value for money, it was superb. 80 quid, I think it was when it, this superb.
No, I mean, it was really good value for money. I think I'm a bit out of touch with how much whiskey costs these days since I moved into just working at one distillery. You sort of lose touch with it. I even remember going back to my very early days, and you think if I had a time machine to go back and buy whiskies that, we had a 17-year-old Port Ellen bottled in the Provenance series Douglas Lang. I think it was something like £85 a bottle or something like that when I first started working in the whiskey shop in Inverness. I thought, I could go back and grab that for £85 now.
Add a couple of zeros onto that now.
Yeah. I think you kind of think about that as well when you're looking. You don't ever look at a bottle on the shelf and think, "Oh God, are they in trouble?" You know what I mean? But then when you see sort of like the likes of Mira recently or Penderin having to kind of scale down on things,
Yeah,
I think those kind of things make you appreciate what we've got a lot more. I mean, certainly, I've now cracked into the 2018 because the single cask it's mysteriously disappeared. I don't know where it's gone, so you'll have to send some more. But
The leaky glass, Davis.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, for goodness sake. I'll have to get a new one. But no, it makes you appreciate what's around you a lot more. And then, like I was saying earlier on, the community aspect at Wyvis is it's just great. Everything is by the community, for the community, especially the Goodwill Fund. It's just great.
No, it is. It is. The ethos we have, it's what really drew me in the very beginning. And that giving back to the community. And when you're seeing actually people take the money that we've given them and seeing real outcomes from it, you know, it's for us, it makes it all worth it. And I say although we were the first 100% community-owned distillery in the country, we hope we're not the last.
Yeah. And how much of a production team do you have?
So we have one distillery operator, and we have me as a distillery manager. Also, so there's only 2 of us in production at the distillery.
So that's a banging staff right out.
Yeah, we only have 3 full-time members of staff at Glenwyvis.
Really?
Yeah, so it's a small team. But for us, it's again because it doesn't take many people to make good whiskey. So the team that I've got around me right now, so we've got 3 full-time and 1 part-time member of staff, plus 12 volunteer directors. And it's everyone believes in the project,
Yeah.
That makes it quite a bit more special. But it does mean, like right now, the other distillery operator is on annual leave. He's earned it. He's away in Vegas right now, and
nice.
So I'm sort of trying to do everything at the distillery myself. So it's been a pretty hectic week. So it's quite nice to sit down and just have a blether and a dram, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for. So you can't be 24-hour production then. What's your kind of production times? What are you?
No, so we currently are running a 5 mash week. We operate just Monday to Friday. It's it's not a good way to run a distillery in terms of efficiency, because the distillery cools down a lot over a Saturday and Sunday, and a Monday is long. Because we were I believe it was the second distillery in Scotland to be their stills fully powered by biomass boiler just behind Ardent American. It takes a long time for a biomass boiler to heat up in a December Monday morning. So I can go 3.5 hours before I get steam into the stills, on a Monday morning. So Mondays can be long. But right now we're working at a 5 mash week, and we can do that in a 40 hours Monday to Friday. I was previously working a 6 mash week, Monday to Friday, and I was doing that in a 50-hour week. But at that time, I was the only operator at the distillery, and it was too much for one person to do. So I did that for about 6 months, and I thought, I'm taking it back down to 5 mashes. We're hopefully looking at expanding production though. So right now we produce about 55,000 litres of pure alcohol a year. I mean, it might sound like a lot, but if you look at what our neighbours are producing at, like Savard and Morangie and all that, it really is not much at all.
Yeah, they're probably doing that in a week.
We make about a cask of whiskey a day.
Yeah, okay.
That's what we do at Glenwyvis. That's the way it works out. And it's a good way of measuring it. So, I mean, it's not a huge amount, but we still make, we're not like a lot of these other, even you've seen some of these real micro distilleries about where I know the theoretical maximum we could put out of that distillery if we did want to work 24 hours, 365 days, I think it's about 125,000. It's a theoretical output. Obviously, cutting down on the 60 fermentation at that point, but
Yeah, and cutting down on a social life of any sort.
Yeah, I mean, I do like to see my wife and daughter, but
okay. So yeah, and Glenwyvis hasn't been without setbacks. There was a fire, 2019, was it? There was a fire in the.
yeah. So obviously, I've seen someone has mentioned in the comments. It was only a matter of time, which I will touch on because
I thought we'd done well to avoid it, but
I wasn't going to mention it.
It is the elephant in the corner, isn't it? But I'll talk about the fire. So I remember the fire really well. I think it was October 2019, and myself and my wife, we were put on the day that the fire happened. Our house was going onto the market. We're selling our house, and she said I couldn't be late home that day because the estate agent was coming around, so I had to be getting an early finish. And when I called her to tell her the house was the distillery was on fire, I think she thought it was a joke at first, but it was. Yeah, so we had a wood chip biomass boiler, and it was myself and Duncan on site at that time, and it became quite obvious because I remember it was Duncan at the time, so I was only still learning operators, but Duncan noticed there was alarms going off in the boiler, and it became obvious that there was a fire in the auger which feeds the boiler. So what we had thought would happen was the fire had somehow spread back through all the mechanisms and was spreading back towards the wood chip store, but that's not what happened. It was actually spontaneous combustion is what we were told inside the wood chip store.
All right.
Because we had a big investigation afterwards, but fair play to the fire brigade, the local fire brigade and everything. The whole thing was under control in a matter of hours, and the wood chip store at Glenwyvis was built in such a way as to contain a fire. Like that was then. The fire did not spread out of that building, and there was no damage done. There was no damage at all. But we just had it was a lot of wasted wood chip, and it was very clean smoke. It was just pure wood that was burning, So it was all under control. But there was slight damage to a gearbox in the wood chip store that feeds just with the fire with the heat, and because our boiler comes from a company called Binder in Austria, and all the boilers are actually made by hand. So the gearbox took about 4 months to arrive.
I was going to say it's quite a long way off, wasn't it?
So we had a fair amount of time out of production. So our 2019 vintage is fairly scarce. So hence why also like the little brown dog bottle is quite unique, because it was, it was filled in 2019.
I've just bloody cracked it open, Craig. You not have told that story at the start.
But it was, the fire was a wee bit of a setback, but thankfully there was no damage to any of the distillery equipment or the building or anything at all. And even the wood chip store, there was no damage to it because obviously it did its purpose and contained that fire within there. So the elephant in the room is probably the issues we've had with our neighbour and landlord. And I'll touch on this just briefly because I think it is important because it is very unfortunate. And so far, it really has only been one side of the story that's been loudly shouted by one individual.
Yeah.
But our landlord is our founder. It was him and me. It was him that hired me in 2015. And it was just the two of us for the whole first year. So I've worked very, very closely with him. And it's so unfortunate. We never ever wanted it to come to this. But unfortunately, I don't think when money was taken, in the crowdfunder, he needed to realize, a company is run differently than if it was your sole one thing. Everyone at Glenwyvis there now is solely committed to fulfilling our community remit, and there's all these allegations of, like no transparency and it's been hijacked, and it's unfortunately just really isn't true. And it got to the point obviously where we've said no, there was actually a court case, and Glenwyvis won on all accounts. It went to appeal and Glenwyvis won that as well. And it became very obvious, when it actually came to scrutiny and presenting evidence, that the distillery has never done anything wrong. And we just want, as far as I'm concerned, all I want to do is fulfill the promises that we made in 2016 when we took all those people's money of having a renewably powered, sustainable community distillery.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that it is just one person, but it's unfortunate this person is particularly vocal. But the distillery.
Does he own the access as well? Is there something to do with the access?
Well, the access is actually a shared access between the distillery and himself. He owns the land underneath the distillery. He is the landlord, which he what we rent off him at £1 a year. So it's very generous in that term. I'll hold my hands up, because I've been involved from the beginning. I can see that distillery would not be there if it wasn't for him. And I'm not hiding that fact. He was a real visionary and a lot of energy, but it was just the extra part of running a business. That when you've taken that amount of money from the public. But as I say, like the board we have now are all fully committed to Glenwyvis. None of them get paid, despite what some people might say. None of them have hijacked it. It genuinely is what it says in the tin, and I'm very, very proud of Glenwyvis. It's for me, it's something I can hold my head high and say, like, I've been involved for 9 years. And when that first grant of £10,000 just over about 2 years ago got given out to the local community, I got quite emotional because I was like, wow, it really is, like coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And then
do these local groups, do they apply for funding, or how is it?
It's like grant funding that they can apply for. So a portion of all of our online sales go into this Goodwill Fund, amongst some of our cask sales and all that as well, and we top it up ourselves from the distillery. So we have different levels of the Goodwill Fund, and this is where I probably should know off the top of my head, but we have like the education section, we have entrepreneurial, we have environmental component to it, so and like people can apply under these different headings and receive money from the distillery. So we've done new sensory rooms for special needs children in the local area. We've done lots of other stuff like that. It's fantastic, Yeah. And I just hope that
all within the Dingwall postcode as well.
So far it's been very Dingwall centric. Yeah. But as the years, and we thought because it was the first couple of grants, we would focus on the town that we were in. But going forward, we were going to open it up, and the radius will grow, to more of the North Highland community.
That's excellent.
No, it really is, and also continue to produce good whiskey. We've got some exciting releases coming for the end of the year, which I'm quite excited about. Because I've only been manager for coming on 4 months now. There's a wee change in direction. What we're doing with our releases. But I'm quite excited to see how it goes, and again, I have to keep going back to the boy who is 18, worked in the whiskey shop, realising he likes Glenfarclas, to deciding the release schedule for a distillery it is quite a cool thing.
Quite a step up, eh? I think I've just cracked into that 2019 because I don't know where the 2018 went, but you're maybe going to send me more.
We have to get better bottles. They must leak.
Yeah. Dr. Jock's got a lot of explaining to do with these half-empty bottles he's sending you.
That's it. It's either that or the Glenfarclas tumbler that I got in the whiskey week has got a crack in it. But this is, I think, it's the first time I've nosed a whiskey and then sat back as quick and then rechecked the bottle to see what's in it. That is what a phenomenal smell.
It's so different. Like the batch 2 of 18. What people have taken to calling the blue and the orange, So the blue one has it was mainly bourbon and sherry and a little bit of refill, so quite a classic Highland whiskey. Whereas the orange one has got that bourbon backbone, and that bourbon backbone is like 60% of all of what we fill goes into bourbon cask, and
if we're putting
it's got the makeup there, and it's got the wine cask in there, which is just what we're trying to do is show like we can be quite versatile, in what we're putting out there. And of course, we did a few single cask releases last year as well, which were all first fill, all off a sherry cask.
The colour of it, and it's like
5-year-old quarter cask. That's harking. You can tell that I like the Glenmorangie, by the ones that were. That's what color at 5 years old.
You've got a 68% bourbon and then 17 wine, 15 refill in the 19. What wine cask is that?
Off the top of my head,
to disclose this information.
Yeah, no, it's actually on the packaging of the full bottle, but I think it's Muscat. I think it's actually on the box. Sorry, Mike.
Box, I
But
do have a box here.
I think it's Muscat. Is it Mike Marsala?
Is, I think, what's commonly known as absolute juice.
First fill Rex red wine, first fill X Moscatel, and first fill X Marsala.
Marsala, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you have that. You're pretty bang on. It's such a different dram. For me, it's a lot more complex. I think it still has that vibrancy of youth. There's still that creamy malty note there.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I don't think people don't see that as a negative. People quite are excited by that because it shows that spirit, and it shows.
Yeah.
And I was like you when I first started whiskey. I was a sherry slut. I just love sherry bombs, big Glendronach, Glenfarclas. The more I learn about the production of whiskey and where the flavors come from, the more I lean towards bourbon and refill casks because you start to taste more about
the natural distillery character. Yeah,
100%.
It can be lost fairly quickly in a big sherry cask. I mean, I was exactly the same. So I've never heard. I love that expression when you use it from now on, a sherry slat. But I was very much that big sherry bomb guy until I went to work in a distillery, and then I realized, like, there's so much the amount of work that goes into creating your flavor profile of your spirit, and then you're wanting something that showcases that. So that's why Duncan originally put in place a lot of the bourbon led stuff, but Matthew, our second distillery manager, because he had the bourbon distiller background, he really wanted to highlight that as well. And like that carrying forward, I think, is important. We filled quite a few. There's so many different cask types that we filled, though, that we've just never released. And 1 month of the year, this was the third year of doing it. No, second year. No, third year of doing it. Sorry, this year, we did heavily peated. So 50 ppm. Up there with Ardbeg.
Heavily peated spirit rather than cask.
We've used heavily peated malt for 1 month of the year. And we filled them into a variety of casks. I pulled a sample from a 2.5-year-old PX hogshead filled with heavily peated spirit, and I was like, it was phenomenal, even at 2.5. Obviously, like, the peat will round off. Now again, I'm a guy who likes peated and unpeated whiskey. It depends what mood I'm in, but it really was fantastic. So I'm looking forward to being able to showcase some of that heavily peated stuff, and we've done lightly peated as well. Again, we're small, independent. We're not beholden to anyone, so we can. It sounds ridiculous, but we can do what we want. It's and like the other distillery operator, Kev. He's a bit of a distilling geek as well. And like Matthew, he was really into like the geeky stuff of distilling. And the three of us, the conversations we have, like what will we do next? Like a couple of mad scientists. It was good fun.
Yeah. So have you found, or do you want to find, a distillery character that you say this is going to be Glenwyvis for the next 20, 30 years? Or are you still kind of saying, well, let's change the cut points, let's change the peat level, let's play about with it?
For most of what we produce, we do have that character. And that's just to say, I want, although we can jump about with what we do, I want someone to pick up a bottle and say, that's a Glenwyvis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you can't go too far the other way, can't you?
No, I mean, I know there's a lot of the new distilleries. There's maybe less of that. People are moving away from that. But I think that's come from Duncan into me. You want people to say, that's a Glenwyvis.
Yeah.
So there will always be that part, but we have got that room for that experimentation in there as well, which will probably be more into limited releases and special releases and stuff like that, and single casks. But I'd like to think, have what I call it, a typically Eastern Highland character, that light, fruity, grassy, new make, wee bit of spice in there.
I do love when you guys over in the West call it East. It's like
I know
the Far East.
Really,
you still call yourselves East, but like it's so
I know. I get that, having family in Inverary. I totally get that. And I remember when I first went into, there's a wee story when I first went to university, as a man who grew up in a wee village in the Highlands, I knew that in my first halls of residence, it was sort of like a flat up at Hillhead in Aberdeen University, and there was 5 of us in there. And when I found out, like, I thought they could be from anywhere in the world, you know. And when I arrived in, 2 of the guys were from Tariff, 1 guy was from Mintlaw, and 1 guy was from Fife, you know. And I'm still amazing friends with these guys to this day, you know what I mean? But and the guy from Mintlaw was always saying, like, you're West, you're West, you know, you're West, you know. Like, and I was like, no, I think Inverness is still East, classed as East Coast. He's like, don't be stupid.
Do you know what? I'll be back in just a sec. I'm going to go and grab my tasting journal. It's not often that I write in it anymore, but I'm going to go and get it, and I'm going to write about this.
Okay.
So, Craig, when you mentioned at the start, when you kind of got that distillery manager role, you went into a health and safety meeting, and there was all these different guys from different distilleries and all that. What's your relationship get with some of the other distillers? Are they quite easy to pick up a phone and say, can I get a hand here?
Well,
can I get advice?
Yeah, coming from the gin industry, because obviously we were producing gin before we produced whiskey. The gin industry was so cutthroat. It really was. Even then, when I was in there, I tried to maintain a good relationship with some of the local other gin distilleries, and I did manage that with quite a few of them. But overall, the Scottish gin industry was ruthless, because everyone was trying to get a bit of that pie. Whiskey's totally different. Everyone is so good to you. And we've got a particularly good relationship at Glenwyvis with Dornoch and 8 Doors, all the way up the north.
All right, yeah.
So we've got good relationships with them. But even taking them out of it, like when we went to visit Glenord, everyone there was just so decent to us, And I find that people are always willing to help,
Yeah.
And especially in the whiskey industry. I think everyone feels like they're playing for the same team in the grand scheme of things. It's Team Scotland. It's Team Whiskey.
Yeah, Team Scotland. I think I was listening to a podcast, and it was Ross's Whiskey Stories. I don't know if you.
No, not from that one.
So it's Whiskey Stories. Ross was on our Blether a few months ago, but he was on with next week's guest, who's Peter Allison, who's the blender for Woven. And he worked with Macallan for a long time, in the marketing side of things. And I think from the consumer point of view, and even as a retailer, sometimes we think that the Edringtons and the Diageos are the bad guys. They're the dark side of whiskey, the big behemoths. But he was saying that these are the most open guys and the key cogs to the small guys, because they give advice, they give casks, they welcome you in and kind of show you things, and that's kind of a side of the industry we don't see as we see them ramping up prices and charging a fortune for non-age statement 4% whiskey. We don't see how much they're helping you guys.
Yeah, totally. And I was exactly the same before I moved into the primary sector of the industry and into the production side of the industry. I always had that these big guys they're not the good guys. Like the whiskey they're producing, but it's just not true. Although, like, obviously, especially the guys on the ground, I can't speak to people in head offices and all that, and directors, but the people on the ground and the people surrounding like the actual Scottish operation, they're all really decent people, almost always, and they're all, if you pick up a phone and say to someone, hey, I'm having a problem with this, can you help? So even like it's just an example, I keep going back to Duncan, but just shows you, like, I've just got so much respect for him, and I feel like I owe where I am today to him. And he's not dead or anything; he's just retired. I'm still in touch with him. I make him sound like he's gone. But he, like, people would call him because they knew how much of knowledge he had coming from his years in Diageo, and he would pick up the phone, and like anyone would call him, ask for help. I remember, so when I said we did this. For our Christmas night out, we do tours of other distilleries. Mm-hmm. One year we said we're going to go to Skye, and we were going to do Raasay, Talisker, and Torvik. And we did that. And we all dressed up really stupid, as a distillery. I wore a lederhosen, and it was just ridiculous. It was just nuts. Duncan was the one driving, and me and my other two colleagues were all dramming, and we had German beer and all that on the ferry over to Rassie. And when I contact, because you get to know people in the industry, I called up Rassie ahead of time saying, like, hey, we're coming, Glenwyvis is coming, and then like I turned up in a later hose, and it's anyway. But when we went to Talisker, we were doing the tour, and we just got, like, because it was it was actually quite busy, we just got thrown in with a bunch of tourists. And I remember we were at the mash tin, and then a member of staff, and it was actually the distillery manager of Talisker, walked by at the time. He goes, Duncan. And you went, yeah. And he's like, we've got a problem. Can you come help us? And Duncan disappeared for like an hour. You know. And he came back and said, he goes, well, don't worry, we drank your dram for you, you know. But it is an industry where people are willing to talk to one another and help, you know.
Yeah.
It really is.
Awesome. And I guess in the face of it, if it wasn't for the likes of Diageo, we wouldn't have an independent bottling market like we do.
No, I mean, when you look at all these independent brands, you know, like maybe brands that they don't give the full TLC to themselves, but they're still happy for the liquid to go to independent bottlers to shine through, so to say. You know, there's so many good ones. You know, like I've had so many good Dalyuans and all that. You know, from independent bottlers. It's just
Dalyuan's right up there with me. Dalyuan, and I know. Well, the guys will be fed up and be harping on about Ardmore. I fucking love Ardmore. But Dalyuan would be right up there as well. Then Ben Rinnes, another great dram.
Do you know what? I think it's as bad, right, Craig? Every time we're in the malt machine with Mike and we pass Ardmore, he's like, he's driving and he's looking out the window at Ardmore and he goes, you know, if I won the lottery, I'd fucking own that place.
If money was no object. So there's our next question.
Muscle memory as well. It's muscle memory because he's still looking at the distillery and he's going around corners.
That's it.
I would own that if that was money was the
He's driving past it in his sleep.
Smelling it in my sleep. That's a problem.
You can't blame him, though. You can't blame him. When you come to Ardmore from the Inverurie side, it's standout. It's like a picture postcard. And you know, when the snow is on the ground as well, you could send that away to, you know, like a little postcard or a Christmas card and stuff. Say, Merry Christmas, here's Ardmore, you know. And it's picture postcard, that place.
I mean, it's another very good dram. You know, I've not had it in a few years, but when I worked in the whiskey shop, it was so reasonable. Like, I remember the 25-year-old Ardmore was so reasonably priced compared to some of the other brands, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like the train goes like near enough right through it, doesn't it?
You're
I remember, like, if I get the train from Inverness to Inverurie, like you literally go through the distillery.
Yeah, got the big teacher sign on the side of the distillery.
Yeah.
I think it's about 95% of it goes into teachers.
Yeah.
But it's such a beautiful site. And the still houses. And they've got the old Victorian mash tun as well. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. Although there's rumours that's getting replaced, which will be a tragedy. I'll be straight on Invented to buy that off of them.
Right on eBay. It's a shame. The train line runs between their water source and the distillery. Mm-hmm. So you're literally running over, hundreds of years of history.
And that there's a signal office there that is, I think, one of the only 24-hour manned signal offices in the country.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I know that because we always get told off for going down next to train tracks to take photos of it. And there's always somebody there telling you to bugger off. You have to time it right when he's on his break.
Right.
So, Craig, there's a question for you. If money was no object and you didn't already have this great setup you've got at Glenwyvis, what distillery would you buy and why?
Question.
I know it straight away. Money was no object. It'd be Strathisla.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I've been there about 15 times. And it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And the whiskey is good as well. You know, I recently I had you know how the Chivas do the distillery exclusive ones, you know, like the 50cl.
Yeah, the V50cl. Yeah.
So I had a 26-year-old Strathisla that I sherry cask that I just finished off the other night, and it was incredible. You know, really, really good. So if money was no object, I would move to Keith and be buying Strathisla.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to obviously that would incorporate all the stock as well.
Yes, of course.
Because the train goes through their warehouse as well. Okay, it's Chivas and everything that comes with that, but the train goes through their warehouse setup as well.
They do. I'm not like plugging Pernod Ricard, but they do an amazing tour there. You know, where you can do your own little blending experience there, make your own blend up, and I did that with a few mates, and it was that was a good day. We got the train through to Keith from Inverness, and had a few pints before going down to the distillery, and did that, and then we got into the Royal Salute Vault and everything. You know, we kept talking. You know, and it's a distillery that I'm quite fond of.
They've got 3 great tours. So you've got your tour and the wee tasting at the end. Then they do the warehouse experience, and they've got the blending experience. So we're actually in talks with them for next year to run these 3 back to back and just have a day at Strathyla and do the 3 tours back to back. And I think I've done the blending experience before, and it's phenomenal. It's so generous. But also really geeky as well. You can get lost pretty quickly in doing that kind of experience. It's phenomenal.
When I was there doing the blending experience, myself and my 2 buddies that were with us, we were all really into whiskey, so we're taking it quite seriously. But also there, by invitation, I think it was, they had 4 of the farmers who supply grain to the distillery.
All right.
And they were just necking the samples without even mixing them. You know, they were just knocking the samples back one after another. Like,
that's the farmers for you. They're like, yeah, I'll get it.
They just saw all this free whiskey on the table and thought, I'm going to make the most of this because I think we got told we had half an hour to do it. And they were in pretty merry shape by the time that was done. With nothing to show
you could get lost in it. They were maybe just using their belly as the blending vat.
Of course, yeah. Let you know in the morning how bad the hangover is, if it was a good blend or not. But like, I've been to a couple of good distilleries. Like I did the tour at Teeling's Distillery in Dublin.
Okay.
That was quite interesting. Very tourist orientated, if you know what I mean. When I went there, I think it had only been producing for about 2 years. One thing that did disappoint me though, the whiskey was you got whiskey at the end, but here's a 15-year-old Teeling, but they tell you it'd been operating for 2 years before that. It was all from Cooley Distillery, but which was good, you know, because stuff that Cooley Distillery puts out is pretty good, you know.
Was it Cooley that Graham Cool went to?
Dingle.
Dingle was it Dingle?
I remember it was like Dingle.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Graham went from Glenmorangie to Dingle, and I know that as well because I was working at a trade event in Nuremberg in Germany, and I bumped into a few of the guys from Dingle Distillery, and it was me and one of my colleagues and 2 Scottish guys and 3 Irish boys out in Nuremberg. Working the next day at the trade event was pretty hard going, but it was interesting going round that distillery. But so much of what they like the tour, the first thing they asked in the tour, which I thought was, is anyone here Scottish? I'll put my hand up, and I feel like they have to change what they're saying.
All right.
You can tell because a lot of it's like, oh, this is why Irish whiskey is better than Scotch whiskey, and you're like, no, just take it for what it is. You know, you don't have to do that constant comparison.
I think a lot of the Irish whiskey, I wouldn't say that it gets a bad name anymore, but I think it's all down to the Pattison crash in Campbellton, and I think that's always what it's attributed to. Almost always. I mean, it was great reading David Stirk's book. I'm plugging David Stirk again, but he's a fantastic whiskey author.
Oh yes, no, I had a great time shooting around to Glenwyvis.
He's just great, is he? We got chatting actually. We did a tasting at the shop, and it was kind of one of those in-depth moments when you get him aside from the tasting. You know, everyone else was kind of chatting amongst themselves and stuff. And I had said to him, was like, so how much do you know about Campbellton? Because Mike had loaned me a book, The Distilleries of Campbellton, that he wrote, and it's just so good. It's so in depth with everything that you need to know about Campbellton. And when you read into the Pattison crash, you're just kind of like, well, is this surely can be where the legacy comes from? Mm-hmm. But for those that are watching that don't know about the Pattison crash, it was 2 brothers from Edinburgh. had moved to Campbellton amongst the Victorian boom, and then had started trading with Irish whiskey, which was poorly produced at the time, not anymore, but poorly produced at the time, with decidedly hurried Scotch whiskey, and then sold as fine old Glenlivet. And then when investors had caught wind of this happening, funding was pulled from Campbellton. So it went from being 30 plus distilleries to now just having then, I mean, modern days, aside from the guys that are in planning now, to Glen Scotia and Springbank. And that was it. But I think that's maybe where the Irish
connotations.
Yeah, I mean, connotations, but I think it's a heritage thing. It must get passed down from generation to generation from those Victorian times, and saying that Irish stuff isn't that great. But like you're saying, I mean, you go to Dingle and Teeling and
Waterford.
Waterford is tremendous, but it's really.
I was lucky enough to do a Zoom tasting not that long ago with Mark Rainier, do a Waterford tasting, and he led us through it. And the whiskey was really, really good, And even obviously, even from going back to my whiskey shop days, Redbreast is a brilliant Irish dram.
Redbreast is the Irish whiskey. It's a standout for me, and I think it's because apart from Jameson, which was that was my gateway to whiskey, was Jameson, but Redbreast single pot was a standout for me, and it still is. I think there's a lot of nostalgia about it, but it's still fantastic whiskey.
I mean, I've always been a big fan of that. Well, apart from when it was on my stag do in Dublin and seen the price of a drum of Redbreast in the Temple Bar area, but that's another story altogether.
Yeah. The price is there. Apparently.
You're talking about Redbreast whiskey, right? Not just Redbreast in general.
Oh well, each to their own.
So, Craig? Did you have a gateway into whiskey, or did you? When you were a student, were you more kind of on the pints and then?
I went to university already being a whiskey fan, so that's why it's bad to say, but I like drinking whiskey prior to turning 18.
Yeah,
and that wasn't in the woods to get drunk. I really did genuinely enjoy whiskey. Glenmorangie 10 was a big gateway dram for me because my grandfather worked for many years at Glenmorangie, and when he retired, he got quite a large quantity of Glenmorangie as a gift.
Okay, so it's definitely in the blood then.
Literally. I mean, when he passed away a couple of years ago, and we were scared to get him cremated because we thought the fire wouldn't go out. But he was it was Glenmorangie 10 for me. And even about the age of 18, I had my first Lafroig, and I really enjoyed that then. It's so I've always sort of been a whiskey fan. But I say having a bottle of malt in university halls is never a good idea because, my flatmates put malt into some really diabolical cocktails. Before hitting Aberdeen town on the night out. But
I think when we were doing pool competitions, it was frowned upon to lose, if you were playing Killer or whatever. And whenever we lost a game, we would have to take a double shot of Lafroig straight off.
That was a punishment.
That was a punishment. So I always, until I met Mike, actually, I had a negative connotation, a negative association with peated whiskey. And then
it was a punishment to you.
It was a punishment, yeah. It's anything that was around about 45 ppm just immediately reminded me of sorrow of losing a sports match. But Mike had said, he was like, "No, you're drinking the wrong stuff," and I thought, wow, what a sales pitch that is. You're drinking the wrong stuff. And then, sure enough, I tried some peated. It was actually, I think it was peated, traditionally peated Glendronach that we've got. I tasted that. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. My brother-in-law introduced me to Port Charlotte.
Oh wow, yeah.
Unreal. And then and Mike pulls in, really decent Octomores into the shop as well. Also phenomenal. And I don't think I've been back. I don't think I've been back to a Lafroig since the last time I lost a game of Killer Pool.
But I think what we do wrong as a society, and it's not an industry problem, it's a society problem, is is we hide away from whiskey, we hide away from alcohol, as in you can't go to a pub unless you're 18, and you know alcohol is bad for kids, and of course it is bad for kids, but hiding it away in that kind of way, I think, just makes kids want it more, and it's going to make them nick it out of dad's cabinet and run to the park and neck it in stupid amounts, wake up really up, and that's the amount of people we have coming at the shop saying, don't drink whiskey because I drank too much of it as a kid, and all I think of is, and you're like, it's our job to try to erase that memory, reintroduce into something that actually, so we have chats, and we do it during the Highland Whisky Academy, we do it during our Whisky Ambassador courses, and it's like, what kind of food do you drink? What kind of food do you eat? Are you sweet tooth? And it's kind of like what, I don't know if you've done a Johnny Walker experience, but before you go, you fill out a questionnaire and they'll assign a Johnny Walker cocktail. So it's kind of like, what do you eat? What do you drink? What, where did you grow up? What's your childhood memories? And then it's like taking all that and trying to find a whiskey that might bring out a different memory. So if their memory is drinking Lefroy in the park in the pissing rain with their kids and waking up stinking of an ashtray and really like hating it, so right, let's go for something really, really light, not too dissimilar, something like this. It's really malty cereal, unpeated, sweet. Try that, and that might bring a different memory of eating Weetabix before school or something like that. You try and tap into that and saying, right, we need to create new memories of whiskey for you because the only memory you have is a terrible one.
Yeah.
And try and bring them back that way.
Dave there has just come up with a really good question. And it's, when do you think a kid should get alcohol? As opposed to, when do you think a kid should get alcohol? But I've just nipped over to the cupboard there, and I've pulled this out. This is, it's a homemade honey wine. We called it the Inverurie Summerberry wine, and we made it on my son's birthday. So
nice.
My son made this, and he's 8. But he is absolutely fascinated. He's at that kind of stage where he's fascinated by the science of things. So how adding a sachet of yeast into a bucket. I mean, we use food grade buckets. It's just, it's the thing when you're making honey wines. And he's fascinated that how you can add this sachet of yeast to a bucket of water and honey somehow makes this, this spirit or this juice that for some reason I'm not allowed it, but I don't know why. But I say to him, like, it's because, but then you introduce them to it slowly. I think there's a lot of the people that we meet, Mike, through the shop that they'll have said, my granddad always let me have a dram at Christmas time or on my birthday or something like that when I was like
a tippy finger, as we called it.
Yeah. And it's slowly introduced to them, and then it just removes that. When you tell kids it's not okay, they want it even more.
It's like when you put the sweeties in the top shelf, they'll find a way.
It's human psychology, human nature, isn't it? It's because I was the same. I wasn't brought up with zero tolerance. I was brought up quite well in terms of after my dad obviously played for the local shinty team, and after the shinty, every Saturday it was to the local pub.
Yeah.
And from the age of like 14 onwards, here's a half pint of shandy,
Yeah.
And
you take away that mystery, you take away that intrigue, and people realize that it's there's nothing special about it. I mean, there's lots of things special, especially with, but there's no mystery, there's no intrigue. You just say, well, you don't have to go away. I'd rather, and Killian's only 18 months, so he's well beyond, well beyond that, but I would like to think I can bring him up in a way enjoying the experience rather than the alcohol, and doing it in a way that he's not fazed by, he's not in awe of it and thinking, I'm going to go out and sneak. And I'd rather he was sitting with me watching the football with a half pint of shandy rather than sneaking drinks and going off uncontrollably in a park. And I think that's what we're doing as a society, or as a government. The alcohol focus is on don't. And then you go to Europe, you look at how the French do it, the Spanish do it. It's a family occasion, meal-wise, have a glass of wine. And it just takes away that, and for me, that's the fundamental basis of our, let's not kid ourselves. Scotland has a negative relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, in my opinion, sweep it under the carpet and say, if we hide it, if we don't let kids near it, then it'll go away. It's just not. They'll find it. It's just pushing. It's actually
like you're saying,
it's more intriguing. We'll find a way of doing it, and if you're watching or not, we'll do it. And that's where the trouble starts. Is that they're getting pushed by really cheap supermarket stuff, drink it at home, do it to house parties, rather than this social aspect where they're monitored by publicans, bar staff, door staff in a safe environment.
Yeah,
I think you're totally right. Like, because in my head, even now, drinking is a social thing. Like it's something to be done with friends.
Yeah.
It's something to be done. And I say, even like I even find myself, I won't come home if I'm by myself in the house. I don't have a drink, because I don't enjoy it the same. And I feel whiskey can taste so different depending on the social setting and who you're with and your mood and everything.
Yeah.
And it was something that we always talked about, like how two tasting completely different taste notes for the same dram.
Yeah.
But especially like when it comes to whiskey, because looking at a lot of maybe the older generations, whiskey was very much a means to an end more than to be enjoyed, so to say. Especially here in Scotland, I always say, like, Scotland, we don't appreciate what we really have. But I feel like malt whiskey and even good blends and any whiskey, really, when you look at it for that matter, is a social thing and it should be enjoyed with friends. It just
we had a great chat. Well, be a couple of years now. We had Charlie McLean on the Blether having a chat, and he told us a great story how every year him and his friends get together, go on a fishing trip, they stay in a bothy afterwards, cook the fish that they've caught, and just have a couple of drams. And it's always his task to bring the whiskey. And being Charlie McLean, you can imagine it's always going to be some pretty hefty stuff. It's going to be some great 50-year-old Glenlivet or something extraordinary.
Yeah, insane. Yeah.
And so this one time he was on his way and he's like, shit, I've forgotten the whiskey. So he pulled into a shop, went in, grabbed a bottle. Fine. So they had their day, they were fishing, great catches, got the fire on, they're sitting in the bottom, and they're like, all the friends were like, right, Charlie, time to get the whiskey out, it's going to be good. And he's like, okay. So sheepishly poured his drams, and there you go, boys. And they're all dramming it. This is amazing. Charlie, you've outdone yourself. This is great. What is it? 30-year-old Glenfarclas? Is it this and that? And they're all dramming it. And he's like, well, actually, chaps, it's just a 13-year-old Whitey Mackay, the off the shelf price label. There you go. And it just shows and I say it quite a lot, is you'll never have a bad whiskey in good company. It should be the company that makes it. I love that story. It was just, it just took that whole experience and that level of expectation that they were tasting the expectation rather than the whiskey. And it was such a nice wee anecdote.
I think we found that this weekend as well. Me and Mike were at a fair at Balmoral Castle, and we were selling spirits there. And there was two expressions that we'd taken with us. One was very summery in its flavour, and the other one was it represents a damp forest walk. It's really. It's out there, and I don't think Michael made me say it's Foghouse. It's Mike's own gin.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
So there's the orange blossom honey that we've just released as well, and a couple of weeks ago that was the favourite at Ellen Castle Garden, and it was a hot sunny day. There was grass and there's nice sort of like, the wind's flowing through the trees really nicely. Everyone's in kind of like shorts and t-shirt and things like that. And that was the top seller for the weekend, if I'm not wrong in saying, Mike. And then this weekend just passed, there was showers of rain. It was sort of mildly windy, and then there was reminiscence of last year where the water levels of the river had ran so high just behind Balmoral Castle that the exhibitors were actually having to shout and say to the people, this is what we're selling. It's fantastic. It's great. And, they were saying, that a lot of the reminiscence from this year tended to be from around last year. Like, we had to leave really early because the river was flowing really high. There was water everywhere. And then we found that the other expression that we were selling, the small batch gin, was the favourite. So like you're saying, there's no bad whiskey in good company. But as well as that, like we're saying, it's all around the environment of where you're drinking it, who you're drinking it with. So everyone was saying this weekend that the one that we were selling with that had that damp forest walk edge on it, we were saying, oh yeah, this is great. Where, they were really getting into it. They were really, really loving it. And it's holiday in a glass, essentially. And that's the same as what I'm getting from the 19. It's absolute syrup. There's so many notes around it. And you would not think that something like that would stand out on, I say, a night like this. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but we've had rain kind of off and on all day, and then sun laterally shining in the afternoon, and it's just it's amazing how environment and things affects.
Totally. Like I always remember, and this is a story that I used to share with my very good friend Scott, from the manager of the whiskey shop that passed away, is that one of my fondest memories of drinking whiskey was a bottle of, again, here we go, everyone have a drink, Glengarry, Founders Reserve, sat on Aberdeen Beach. And it was about 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. Mm-hmm. Just me and a couple of mates sat on the beach in Aberdeen with some Glencairns drinking Glengarry Founders Reserve. And at that point, that was the best tasting whiskey I'd ever had, and it was just the atmosphere, the company, it all plays so much into whiskey and gin and any spirit, I feel, really. Because there's times, like when you think, oh, that's a really good whiskey, and shows are not, like, you probably agree with this, shows are not the best place to try whiskies or gins or any spirits. When you're going to a spirit show, a whiskey show, a gin show, whatever it is. Yeah. Because people are going from stall to stall to stall to stall. Yeah. It's normally that wee caps or something. If you get a better one, you might get a Glencairn, but the Glencairn had about 6 drams in it before your dram's gone into it. Yeah. And someone goes, oh, I've just had like a Lafroy quarter cask before this. I'm like, here's the 119 Glenwyvis. Oh, it's got peaty notes to it. Like, that really doesn't, But, and I've even found myself, I used to go to, the show at Elgin Town Hall quite a lot. And
distilled.
Really good times at that show. And as a punter, not as an exhibitor. But there's whiskies that I was there and amongst friends, and I bought. That was one of the amazing whiskey, and I've taken it home and tried it again like a few days later. I'm like, it's not as good as I remember it,
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's amazing how much psychology there is behind. This is really deep chats now for Thursday, but there's amazing how much psychology there is behind what you're drinking and when you're drinking it. I mean, I remember after Whiskey Week, and since I've got my diary now, my tasting journal, there's one that I'd marked up as being the oldest dram that I've ever tried.
Right, it's got to be Ardmore or Glenglassaugh.
You're getting closer. You're getting closer. It is Glenfiddich.
Oh, the family cask.
The family casks, yeah. It was 50.3. And I tasted it on the 7th of September. So it was after the academy had actually ended, because we'd done the first. It was the 1st until the 5th, I think. And our kitchen setup was entirely different from what it is now. And
it's completely different now with that new setup in the kitchen.
Yeah, it does. It does, because I'm not joking. We had like it was like a 2-seater sofa on this side of the dining room, and then I ashamedly I had a weights bench in front of the window, and I was sat on the weights bench and I was tasting it with my good lady, and I've marked it up.
Who was Ariana at the time?
He was on the sofa right next to me. I was sat on the weights bench.
You said you were with a good lady. I said, where's Ariana at the time?
She is my one and only good lady. And And I was compelled. It was the first whiskey I had actually put down as a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Was that entirely down to, was it because it was the oldest whiskey? Was it because I was sat with Ariane? You know, had I tasted it in a dingy old bar in the middle of Aberdeen and had paid however much, 140, I think if we're going on how pub drams work, you usually take how much you pay for a bottle and then you divide that by 10.
100%. Yeah.
You know, and so it was at the time I wrote this, it was £14,500 a bottle. Had I paid £145 for it in, let's just say, St Macher Bar, you know, for a good old time's sake for Aberdeen Uni, would I have enjoyed £145 worth of whiskey as a single measure as much as I did?
25ml poured in a bottle of a Glencairn, aye.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And then there's other ones that I've tasted. I think one of the shop exclusives that we've got was an Oth Risk. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with it, so I can have an unbiased opinion. But you know, when I first tasted it, I was like, "This is supreme stuff." It's a 9-year-old, 59.7, and you know, I put down everything that I was smelling and tasting, and that was after using the tasting kits that were upstairs. You know, I was getting vanilla and apples, and it was peaches and cream and cream soda, and it was hints of this and hints of that. And it was one of the first couple of weeks that I'd actually started working with the shop, and I thought, this is the best bourbon cask Madeira finish that I've ever tasted. But you know, I'm sitting thinking, like, how many?
Was it the only?
And yeah, it's probably the only bourbon maturation and Madeira finish that I've ever tasted. But
you know, I'm even thinking that myself. I wouldn't mind doing that, like as a wee experiment in the distillery. That's what popped into my head as soon as you said that.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, this as an instrument of our industry, a tasting journal is. And if anyone who's watching just now doesn't have one, I would strongly encourage you to go and get one, because I mean, we're talking about situational whiskies. You know, it's not going to taste as good in a function hall as it is when it's, you know, you're in your own house, you're beside the fire, or you're watching something, or you're sitting on a weights bench in your kitchen. You know.
I guess I'm gonna take your 50-year-old Glen Parkless. I'm gonna raise you by 2 cans of export, because Alan Smith has put a wee comment on, which is great. My granddad used to take me walking up the hills for hours when I was 12 years old. Then went back home. I got 3-course meal and 2 cans of export. Never one for drinking in the streets. And I'll bet you those 2 cans of export were just as enjoyed as. And you know, especially now looking back in nostalgia, I mean, Alan, you're probably drinking a can of export today, thinking this is pish compared to the stuff I used to get.
It's not the same.
And it is. It's completely. And I think when you get a warehouse experience of a whiskey, Craig, I don't know if you kind of do that, or you no doubt you've done it. Nothing tastes better than a whiskey straight from the cask.
Oh, 100%. You know, I know that for a fact. It's lost a bit of the magic for me, I have to admit, a warehouse experience, because when I'm sampling whiskey, they're all from the cask.
Yeah.
You know, it's a terrible job to have. Mm-hmm. But that I remember before I worked in a distillery, walking into a musty warehouse and getting the Valinch going into the cask, coming out and going straight into your glass with wee bits of wood or charcoal in there. Yeah. And just something David said there that I'm picking up on is something I never thought about before. In my head, I've got like the top 5 whiskies.
Yeah.
Are any of them ever been a 10 out of 10? I'm not sure, actually. That's something that you're saying. I'm not sure I've ever had a 10 out of 10 whiskey. I don't know if I'll probably go to my grave never having a 10 out of 10 whiskey. Because
I think if you find a 10 out of 10 whiskey, you might stop looking for them.
Yeah. Out of that 5 top whiskies I probably say I've ever had in my life, I don't think I've paid for any of them. And I think removing, I don't know if that's the Scottish aspect of it, you know, but removing that component from it.
See, there's that golden rule that everything tastes better when it's free. And I think it even transcends to when you go to McDonald's drive-thru with the kids and you pinch their chips. Their chips are far better than yours. For some magical reason. I don't know why.
The chicken nuggets out of a Happy Meal have never tasted so good.
I can't believe you'd steal your kids' chips. What kind of monster are you?
Yours. I think though, yeah, that is the thing, isn't it? It's when you get something for free, you kind of go, all right.
Completely objectively.
Yeah,
I'm intrigued now. What are your top 5? You said you think you've got your top 5.
So I
put
mean,
you on the spot.
they're movable. Like
right.
So, like one,
sure.
like I'm not gonna. I say like within my top 5.
Yeah.
One is a 1967 Dalmore bottled under the Sirius collection.
Mm-hmm.
It was a rum cask, one of 89 bottles. I remember it well. It was part of the Sirius collection, bottled by a guy called Mahesh Patel, who ran a whiskey festival in Las Vegas. And I got to try a substantial quantity of it. I would also put in there a 50-year-old single cask Cambus. I'm a big fan of single grain whiskey. I really am.
Yeah.
With in there as well, I would throw a 25-year-old Strathclyde I've had that was just out of this world. I had a Fetter Cairn, also part of that Sirius collection. It was 1960 something. I can't remember off the top of my head. And I've had a Glenfarclas single cask, family cask from the 60s as well.
Yeah.
The way I got to try this cask was really mental, and I don't know if again this goes into what you guys are saying about the psychology behind it. But I was working in the whiskey shop in Inverness. It was the oldest family cask we had. I think it was in 1963 or something like that. And these two guys walk in to the shop, and I was the only one working. And they were Russian, and they just wanted something old.
Yeah.
Want old. But that's fine. So I said, there's 1963 up there. We'll take it. Okay, no, that's a good sale to put through the bill, when you're a day yourself. I
shut up early, go home.
I got the box, and it was the old family cask boxes, like not the wooden ones, but the ones after, like the yellow cardboard ones that they did for a while.
Yeah.
Took it down, and they said, don't need the box. And they opened it in the shop there and then, after buying it, and then started drinking it out of the bottle. So immediately, I just went that, and we had display Glencairn, so I put a Glencairn out and said, can I try some of that, please? And they went that much into the Glencairn and walked out the shop, walking down Bridge Street in Inverness, drinking this 1963 Glenfarclas out of the bottle.
Wow. That's... So I don't know whether it would be really annoyed or really impressed. But
I know. Well, I got to try it, so I was quite happy.
You were chuffed.
You can't be mad at that.
So that would be my top 5, but they move. You know what I mean? I couldn't say which one would be the best, and I wouldn't say any of them were 10 out of 10 because I guess I'm the perpetual optimist that I'll always find better drams.
Do you see a resurgence of grain as kind of eyes are open up to it? Predominantly through independent bottlers, we're now seeing quite a lot of grain hitting the market in single cask form. Yeah,
I mean, I feel grain has to be at a certain age. I'm a manager of a young distillery. I'm like, age is not as important, and I feel almost a bit of a hypocrite when I say when it comes to grain whiskey, I feel like age is a bit more important because I have had some 3-year-old grain whiskey, which was at cask strength. I managed to get through a contact. I'm not going to go into that story, but it was just awful in a refill cask. And it, but I love old grain. I think when you get about 18, 20 years minimum and above, it gets really, really good at that pure, almost banoffee pie sweetness that you get off it.
You get big coconuts and
it's just I use like pina colada sometimes. It's just amazing. But yeah, there's just a real lack of education around it. That's purely it. Now, everyone thinks even if you speak to the majority of like the lay Scottish people, it's like they don't even know about grain whiskey.
Yeah.
They know about your malts, about your blends, but they don't even know because in my head, I think one of the worst things that happened was removing the vatted malt label.
100%, yeah.
That
malt or pure malt is a far better name for that
was a terrible thing. to happen, because as soon as you put blended malt, people hear the B word. Blend, don't like blends, I don't want blends, don't like it. No, it's all malt whiskey, you know. But if you said to like your average Scottish person who is not really into whiskey, can you tell me like what makes a blend a blend? I don't know if 100% they would say like, oh, it's a mixture of grain whiskey and malt whiskey.
Yeah.
You know, they probably say it's a mixture of whiskies, which is correct. But if you say, I always say now, if you mix two malts together, it doesn't become a blended whiskey. It becomes a blended malt under the current rules.
Yeah.
But
and the other thing is, if you tell people that pretty much every single malt is blended to a, you know, in terms of the process.
As soon as you, if you're drinking like a 12-year-old Glenfiddich, that's not one cask of 12-year-old Glenfiddich you're drinking. That's not even 100 casks of 12-year-old Glenfiddich you're drinking. Like the youngest cask on there's like such a range of vintages in there.
Yeah. But it's education is key, isn't it? It's about, and that's why I think as a retailer, doing these kind of chats and not just singling us out, every retailer who does whiskey specialist, you know, Aberdeen, Strongwater, the whiskey shops, and all these kind of guys, it's what sets us apart from a Tesco's, a supermarket, an online store, for example, is that if people aren't sure, you know, the amount of people come into the shop and they're buying, I reckon about 60% of our customers are buying for somebody else. They're buying a present. I even had somebody in last week, 2 weeks ago, saying, when I'm buying for myself, I go to Tesco's because I know I like Talisker and that's what I buy. That's the best price I can get. That's fair enough. He says, but when I'm buying a present and any advice, I'll come to you guys. And I think that's what we can't lose, that high street kind of feel about it, where people come in and say, we need advice, because we can educate as well as.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, Mike. I think that whiskey is the thing that, like, to me, I guess I'm a bit biased because I did it as a job for 5 years, but like, you need that personal touch. You still need to be able to walk in, because the amount of time when I worked in the whiskey shop, I loved my job. I loved it. I went to work every day and just talked about whiskey, like probably very similar to Inverurie. It's just, and being able to talk to people and guide people into buying something. You know, like, and at that point, you weren't beholden to any one distillery either. You know, it was just a free for all almost. Like you could really discern. You could speak to someone, what they like, what this or that, and guide them. Like one thing, I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but when people know that you're involved in the whiskey industry in any sort of way or really into whiskey, I don't get whiskey as a gift ever. No one buys whiskey.
No, we were saying this the other day. You just don't get it.
Nobody buy. I had a rant one year about it. I said, why not have I get fucking whiskey for a present? Is it?
It's terrible. No one will buy you whiskey because they're all scared. Like, oh wow, you know, like they work in the whiskey industry. Like, I'm going to have to spend at least like £100. You know, no, I'm grateful of anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's like, oh, he drinks whiskey all the time. Where he's got a shop full of whiskey. Why would I buy him something he can get?
Yeah, and
it's still the nice idea of getting a gift.
And it's sometimes
everything tastes better when it's free. It's back to that.
But it's sometimes like that, someone buying you something. Because I remember when we had a housewarming, when myself and my wife moved into this house a couple of years ago, and someone bought me a bottle of Tam na Bhulin, and I'd never tried Tam, and I probably wouldn't go out and buy it.
Yeah.
But you know, like that, I got to try a new whiskey. That, yes, it was an inexpensive supermarket whiskey, but it was something I hadn't tried before.
Yeah.
You know, and I probably wouldn't have bought it myself. So it's I think that's one of the curses that we have to like shoulder by working with whiskey. Is like, no, people stop buying it for us.
Yeah. Or they always ask you what to buy. Like if you're in a pub.
Yeah.
Oh, what should I drink? Whatever you want. And then you throw the curveball and say, I'll have a Glenfiddich. And like, what? Yeah, love a Glen. I absolutely love Glenfiddich. I think it's a brilliant dram.
Yeah.
And people are like, why would you drink that? You can buy that in. Yeah, but I'm drinking it because I like it, and I don't have it all the time because we're absolutely spoiled with the array of choice we get, and sometimes it's nice to have that kind of little comfort, familiarity at the end of the day of saying, well, yeah, let's go back to basics sometimes.
Yeah, no, yeah. I completely agree. I actually had a Glenfiddich 12 for the first time in a very long time, about 3 weeks ago, and I was like, wow, that's a really nice dram. Mm-hmm. You know, one thing I hate as well is this happens all the time to me, and I just like, weddings, no matter where, someone will get you a dram and they'll give it to you, and you're like, thank you, and you're like, what's that? And you're like, oh my God. And I always remember this. My wife's uncle did it to me at a wedding once, and I smelt it and I tasted it, and I went, that's a Glenmorangie Dornoch. And he just blew his mind.
Yeah.
He's like, that's incredible. You didn't just get the distillery, you got the bottling. I was drinking Glenmorangie and Dornoch so much the night before, so that was the next whiskey that touched my lips. I was like, that's the exact same stuff I was drinking last night.
I had a similar story. I was invited by Blair Sterick. I don't know if you know Blair. He was with Morrison Distillers at the time. He's now moved to Harris. But he invited me down as a guest to the Worshipful Company of Distillers dinner 2 years ago. And they had the welcome dram. So he went and got off the tray a couple of drams, and he goes, oh, you'll never guess what this is. He's have a nose. And so I had a nose, and like it was around about the time that Glenallachie had released their wood series, and one of them was a Koval rye cask finish. Yeah. So we bought in, and we did a tasting with it, and we got in the Koval rye whiskey and did a like by like. And there's this very, I don't know if you've ever tried rye whiskey, there's quite a distinct eucalyptusy kind of sweet medicinal note, rather a smoky medicinal note about it. So that was the first thing I picked up, and I was like, I won't be able to tell you the whiskey, but it's either a rye whiskey or it's a rye cask. And Blair was just like, he's like, because he'd be pitchy, he's like, you're never going to guess this. And it was the Arbiki rye was in the glass. And that was me, like, mic drop. I'm not going to do this anymore. I've peaked.
Yeah.
Retire
never again.
I've got one more story like that. And it was after I left the whiskey shop, they still did a big annual tasting at Christmas time. And I used to go along to it because we had, the W Club that's associated with the whiskey shop. We had a really loyal W Club, quite a large one in Inverness. I used to always go along to the Christmas one with my father-in-law. And this year they had 3 bottles, but they were just empty. They were blank, complete blank 50 shells. All on them were duty stamps. And everyone had to try them and try and guess the region. And the winner got a bottle of Big Pete at the end. And at the end, it was still Scott was the manager at the time, and he said how proud he was. He taught me everything I know. And he, what'd call it? Beautiful dram.
I've seen it.
I didn't just guess the region, but I got the distillery on all 3 bottles. And he was just saying, this is amazing, what a good palate. And at the end I said, you do realise it's blank bottles, but you've got the original cork in all the bottles. So that was an Ardbeg. I had an Ardbeg cork, and I was the only person in that whole room that picked that out.
Oh, I love it.
I got a 3 for
Big Pete here somewhere as well. Actually,
you really shouldn't have disclosed that. You really should have just left it.
I couldn't have let him know that. I couldn't let him think my palate was that refined.
I must confess, I keep my Big Pete in the fridge.
No judgment.
It's a barbecue
sauce.
That's it. But I mean, when you're a whiskey enthusiast, you're just going to buy everything that's got the name on it, aren't you? So,
yeah, I loved Craig there. The way you said no judgment was so much through gritted teeth.
You had it written off as a whiskey straight away.
I know. I've got my Big Pete in the fridge. I'm like, there's a story behind it.
There's a story behind it somewhere. Yeah. Turns out it's a barbecue sauce.
Oh, I have to find that now. That sounds incredible.
It is good. I have had it before.
Yeah. Me and Mike were at Taste of Geary. God, when was that, Mike? Now,
First week of August.
God's sake, time passes so quickly when you're constantly sifting through spirits. But the Singularity Sauce Company, where they were across from us in the car park, just outside the town hall, and they sell in a local shop here, the Quilted Frog, who I think Mike, we're going to have to speed at Patrick for some sort of loyalty discount or something like that, because if we're ever all struggling on a Saturday, it's the first thing that we go and do is we'll go right to Patrick. We'll get something off of him. And this guy, he's absolutely fantastic. He's originally from Paris, and he's got this it is like a Parisian deli. Like he's got all the the saucisson, the sandwiches.
He's the most Frenchman you've ever met in your life.
Yeah, but
The only thing he doesn't do is cycle to town with onions round his shoulders.
yeah. I think I caught him one time, and I bought this. It was a French Connection T-shirt, but it was like that, you know, the Yves Saint Laurent adverts, and they're all wearing the blue and white stripes across the way. And I rolled in with like a knitted beanie that Ariane had knitted for us going to Paris, and I dropped in, and he says, "You are looking very French just now," and I was like, "Oh, thank you very much." And I had only gone and picked up like Singularity sauce that he sells. But yeah, we'll need to. That's one for Saturday, Mike. We're gonna have to speed it in for getting a loyalty card or something. But he sells a lot of the Singularity sauce companies. But I think it's maybe the second one I've seen that has whiskey as like a core ingredient, and the second one, the first one that I'd seen was when I used to work at a American barbecue restaurant, and the chef there was from Costa Rica, but had lived in like sort of mainland America for a while, and then had shifted to Inch, which like you'll know from having family in like why you in Inch of all places, but now he's actually cooking out he's in Bankery now, but he used to do sort of like infused sauces and stuff like that. So that's how I've come about that one, and that's why it stays in the fridge, because it tells me to keep it in the fridge for 3 weeks upon opening. But me and Mike were trading across from him, just outside the town hall, and I'd gone across and said, "Oh, you're in the shop here," and he says, "Yeah. Well, just take this one for free because you guys are whiskey guys. You'll have to taste this one." So yeah, he gave us that. But he's done heaps of stuff now. He's got one out with like the Aberdeen Lynx hockey team.
Okay.
His hot sauces are just
that sounds amazing. You make my mouth water.
Hot sauce. That's where to go. He's really good.
Craig, I'm going to say thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We could talk for hours. We could be decidedly unhurried about this. I know that a lot of our followers, a lot of our watchers are going to be jumping ship to go and see Roy on the Aqua Vitae, which starts in about 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be one of them. I'll be joining on. It's an interesting topic tonight, bourbon versus sherry. So I'm going to be throwing out my sherry slut slang again on that one. But it's an absolute pleasure. And just to give up your time, you were saying there that you're the only one working at the distillery just now. Long days, and for you to give up a couple hours on a Thursday night means a lot to us. I'm sure it means a lot to the guys at home as well. So thank you so much.
I've loved it. I've really enjoyed it, boys. And next time I'm down in Inverurie, I'll definitely pop into the shop and say hi.
Yeah, please do.
Please do.
Before we finish off, should we raise a glass to Scott?
Yeah, I would love it. Yeah,
he's no longer here.
Got that?
Yeah, no, he's a good guy, and yeah, Flange Scotty.
Go on yourself, Scotty.
Yes.
Thanks again, Craig. It's been really good.
One of these guys that what you know, it has obviously introduced so many people to whiskey that have gone on. Whiskey's that kind of industry. Once you're in it, it's very hard to get out of, and because you don't want to. You might move job to job, but there's something about whiskey that gets under your skin and just stays there, doesn't it?
A job for life.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Definitely.
Just before you all go, next week's guest, I did kind of mention him earlier on. Peter Allison is joining us. He is the blending mastermind behind Woven Whiskey. So that's and Peter is a guy who knows whiskey. He knows the blending process, and it's great. We chatted about grains tonight, and we talked about old whiskies, young whiskies, and all that stuff. And it's going to be really interesting to see Peter's take on it and see how because his whole remit is about blending experiences. He wants to take you somewhere on a taste. He doesn't, and what Woven do really well is it's not just Scotch. He'll take whiskey from all over the world and blend it. So I'm really, really excited. It's another one for the geeks, and I'm really excited to get Peter on. Davis, you might be here. I'm not sure. Cat will certainly be back. We might have 4 people on screen. You never know. But thank you for filling in tonight.
All good. All good. I know I've got something interesting for next week. That's for sure. But I'll have to wait and see if I'm on to reveal what it is.
Yeah. So, guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for your questions. I hope we've given you an insight into Glenwyvis. We have it in stock at the shop. So, shameless plug, the Blether's not about selling whiskey, it's about talking whiskey. But if you happen to stumble across the website and see a Glenwyvis there, you know what the distillery is all about. So,
yeah,
so maybe you make a purchase.
If you can get your hands on that 2019, I've only had a sample, and I wish to God I'd had a full 70, because that is unbelievable, Craig.
I appreciate that, Davis. Thank you.
Keep up the good work, Craig. And likewise, if we're ever up in the area again, we'll give you a call.
Give us a shout, yeah. Take your workbooks with you.
Yeah. We'll also get something arranged at working in Glenwyvis for a day or something.
Rolling some caster, right? There's always caster roll.
Fantastic.
Good night, guys. Lunch. Take care.